I was received along with my family in the church in February of 1998. My first encounters with Orthodoxy were when I was in college in the early and mid-1970s. I was a classics major, reading Greek and Latin, and was an active Christian. Had been involved in a lot of Protestant Christian activities, sort of in those days Jesus freak sort of things. And but I was majoring in Latin and Greek and began reading the fathers in Greek, particularly the Cappadocians, and was interested in that. And a friend of mine gave me a copy of Vladimir Lossky's Mystical Theology of the Eastern Church, which of all books to read first about Orthodoxy is probably not the one. And I dare say I didn't understand most of what I read, but what I did understand certainly sowed a very deep seed in my heart and answered questions that were later to be very important questions for me. From college, I was an Anglican at the time. From college, I went directly to an Episcopal seminary in the Chicago area. I was there for 3 years. I graduated, was ordained, and began serving in Episcopal parishes in South Carolina. But when I was in college, when I was in seminary, my dogmatics professor had actually done his doctorate at Harvard under Father George Florovsky. And so he was always acknowledging my interest in questions about Orthodoxy and giving me things to read. I was hacking my way through Gregory Palamas in French. Since he didn't exist in any English translation, we had the triads, and I was reading some in that. And in fact, I really had to sort of cram for my finals and actually read some Anglican theology before I graduated. It wasn't nearly as interesting. But I think one of the burning questions for me, I don't know if I always stated it that way, but on a very existential level was the question of, can you actually know God? Is God someone whom we can know, or is God only to be approached through various forms of mediation, whether scripture or theology or whatever? And much of what I was running across in Western theology and reading it seriously was very much of a mediated sort. In fact, I had a professor of philosophical theology who thought that it was absurd to have any notion of an unmediated knowledge of God. And though I would try to write papers on that, drawing from Palamite sources and things, it was just treated as nonsense. But that's a real question. Do I actually know God or not? Or am I just talking and offering my opinions? And so I kept reading that. And though I served in parishes and would read what I could and did what I was supposed to do, I had visited in some Orthodox churches when I was in college, but at the time, in the 70s, in the South, really, I visited in a Greek church, which was all Greek language, and though I could follow it reading, it just didn't seem like something that was an option, nor was I being encouraged by anyone to pursue that option. And so I tended to think, well, I'll just try to do my best as an Anglican. But the question remained. After about 9 years or so as a priest in the Anglican Church, I decided to, maybe a little longer than that, I decided to go back to graduate school and went to Duke to work on a doctorate in theology, which I wound up turning into an MA, which is another long story by itself. But there I was working under Gregory Wainwright, who was a Methodist theologian, but also he himself had done his doctorate under Nikos Nisiotis and is very well thought of by many Orthodox theologians. In fact, has been a commencement speaker at St. Vladimir's, primarily using liturgical sources for the foundation of a systematic theology. And he encouraged me and allowed me to just read freely in Orthodox sources, which I just buried myself in with much the same burning question in my heart, although that really expanded out. The thesis I did at Duke was on the icon as theology, in which I looked at used sort of the Seventh Council and its theology and the ancillary writings around that to do something of a systematic, though I know that's not very orthodox, but was what I was doing. Making that part of the story short, by the time I had finished my work at Duke, all of the answers to the questions I had were coming up orthodox. And so life was getting to be less and less intellectual, in which I was asking less questions that needed to have a theological solution, and the questions were becoming far more existential, as in, well, what should I do about it? And of course, I was married at Duke. I had 3 children. We moved to Tennessee. We had a 4th child, and I was then serving as rector of a fairly large church. And there's a lot of questions about, how do you leave a large church with a decent income and where you have a wife and 4 children to become Orthodox, particularly if you're thinking about becoming Orthodox in the Orthodox Church in America, where in the South there's a plethora of storefront churches and priest and trailers. I mean, it's a difficult life. And so that really sort of began the next stage of our journey. I met Archbishop Dimitri of Dallas. We formed a good relationship. I began talking with him about my interests. And in great Orthodox form, we had those conversations and almost nothing happened, other than the fact that every moment of vacation I could get over the next number of years was spent visiting Orthodox churches. We began to keep an Orthodox home. We learned how to keep the fast. We began to pray as Orthodox with Orthodox prayers and icons things. And I was towards the end of that last several years, I was looking for a job. Of course, that becomes a difficulty too when your resume, all you have on your resume, because all you've ever done for a living is be a priest. Nobody wants to look at your resume. They think there must be something wrong with you, and the things that are wrong with priests are oftentimes not very good things. Frankly, just miraculously, I was offered a job as a hospice chaplain with a local through a local hospital system, and accepted the job, renounced my orders as an Anglican, and literally the timing of things, and this was all according to the Archbishop's wish, I preached my last sermon and said my last Mass on February 8 of 1998. On February 15, a week later, my family and I were received into the church, chrismated, and I was immediately named as a lay pastor for a beginning mission in the Knoxville area, and started doing late vocations program and studying, and was ordained deacon in November of that year, and March of the next year was ordained to the priesthood. All of that is to say that while I was serving as a hospice chaplain and taking care of dying people throughout East Tennessee, I had an Orthodox learning curve that was as steep as you could possibly imagine. The day I was ordained deacon, my prayer was, oh God, I hope there's not a dumber deacon in Orthodoxy, because I'm as dumb as you can get. I just, my sense of what I didn't know, I think all of that was God's plan to bring me to a place of not knowing, which is a very good place to be in doing Orthodox life and theology. I felt the same as a priest, and though I had responsibilities in a parish, a mission, I had a very good group of people who've been very patient with me, and we've done this now together for 12 years. We have a congregation of probably about 150 or more of different nationalities, maybe 80% convert, it took us a while. So in some ways my story was a 20-year story from just reading Bosky to becoming Orthodox. But it was, in hindsight, it was God's hand, and the greatest thing and the greatest blessing that's taken place in my life.